This is a lesson on the relative clause with who, that, and which. We could start the lesson with an example. The man who lives next door is very friendly. Who lives next door is the relative clause. A relative clause is a part of a sentence that tells us which person or thing, or what kind of person or thing the speaker is referring to. The man who lives next door. The part who lives next door tells us which man. Another example, people who live in London. Who live in London tells us what kind of people. We use who in a relative clause when we are talking about people. We use who instead of he, she, or they. For example, the man he lives next door is very friendly would be incorrect. The man who lives next door is very friendly is the proper use. We know a lot of people, they live in London. That would be incorrect. We know a lot of people who live in London would be the proper usage. Here are some more examples where we use who in a relative clause. An architect is someone who designs buildings. What was the name of the man who lent you the money? The girl who was injured in the accident is now in the hospital. Anyone who wants to do the examination must enter before next Friday. See if you can find the relative clause in each of those. It is also possible to use that instead of who. The man that lives next door is very friendly. That would be very common to use. When we're talking about things, we do not use who as the relative clause. We would use it or they. Where are the eggs that were in the fridge? Can you find the relative clause there? Let's take a look at some other examples of things. I do not like stories that have unhappy endings. Charlie works for a company that makes computers. Everything that happened was their fault. The window that was broken has now been repaired. We can also use which for things, but not for people in a relative clause. Where are the eggs which were in the fridge? That would be less common. However, that would be an easier, more common use. Where are the eggs that were in the fridge? Remember that we use who, that, and which instead of he, she, they, or it. Do you know the man who lives next door?